The rot really set in under the Cameron government. It should be required that our politicians have at least some experience in the private sector. It's actually not since 2001 that a single government has presented a balanced budget. I'm Annabelle Denham, and I'll be responding to some of the superb reader comments on my latest article, which was about the debt and how it's cynically used as the ultimate veto by the left on ever-cutting taxes, and yet they never seem to view it as a reason to cut government spending. We begin with a comment from Stephen Card. Not a single one of these fools has either run a business, created anything, or managed anything effectively. None of the other mainstream politicians has either, from university to political lobbying to MP. Not a clue how to create wealth, much less run the economy. We need to insist that all our political candidates have at least real work experience in the private sector before moving into politics. At least that way we might get MPs with more realistic life experiences. It's very difficult to disagree. I certainly think that it should be required that our politicians have at least some experience in the private sector before they move into the public. Unfortunately, the problem is particularly pronounced in the Labour Party. Just one of its 32 ministers has experience setting up their own business. Very few Labour MPs have worked in the private sector, and many are former unionists who will struggle to go from being poacher to gamekeeper, which is perhaps why we saw the Labour government offer that huge bung to public sector workers in the aftermath of the general election, all the while complaining about the fiscal inheritance they'd been bequeathed by the Conservative Party. How easy this would be to implement, I'm not sure, but it's certainly something that I could get behind. And now we move to a comment from Paul Brazier. I still blame the last administration. Usually Conservative governments leave us in a reasonable economic position so that we can weather a few years of loony left policies. Yet the last Tory government betrayed Conservative values and left us badly prepared for the current administration. As a result, Starmer, Reeves and co are driving us into the ground in record time. Yes, that's absolutely right, and it's what we saw in 1997 when New Labour came into power. I think that the rot really set in under the Cameron government. That's when they started talking right but actually governing left despite those austerity years. We ought to remember that it's actually not since 2001 that a single government has presented a balanced budget. We've been living beyond our means for some time now, and successive Conservative administrations presided over an increase in taxes, a massive increase in the amount of red tape that businesses had to adhere to, and just that mindless growth of the state with it interfering in increasing areas of our lives. And now we move to a comment from David Johnson. The quickest way to get idle young people into work is to stop their benefits. No work, no money. If you're healthy, you should be able to take whatever work is available. That's how the majority of the world operates. In countries that don't penalise workers to subsidise those who shirk their responsibilities. I agree. I think we certainly need some stick with the carrot. We have created a system which is too easy to game. Actually, one entrepreneur I spoke to earlier this week was complaining that the hikes to the national minimum wage and the fact that they now apply to younger people disincentivises employers from taking on the under 21s and giving them their first experience of work, because if you're faced with a choice between somebody who's got years of experience and somebody who's got no experience and you've got to pay them the same, well, what's the rational thing for a boss to do in that scenario? So we are cutting off work opportunities to young people at the same time as creating a system which is too easy to abuse. And I'm particularly concerned about the soaring rates of mental ill health among young people and the sense that they're unfit to work and the risk that we are going to trap them in a cycle of dependency where they leave school, they go straight onto benefits, and they find it very difficult to then get on the career ladder. And now a comment from Ian Pine. Higher taxes for everyone are unavoidable, independent of the government of the day. We have a rapidly ageing population with pensioners enjoying an entirely unsustainable triple-locked state pension. My feeling is, broadly speaking, that worsening demographics have been weaponised to justify ever higher government spending and governments raising taxes in order to pay for it. I think if we have an ageing population as we do, then we need to make it easier for people to work past retirement. I agree that the state pension is unsustainable in its current form, and it's actually stoking a lot of resentment among younger people who are very aware that they are footing the bill for a pension for older people today that they will not get to experience and enjoy in their own retirements. I think we'll need to raise the retirement age. Again, that'll be a deeply unpopular measure, but perhaps not quite so unpopular here as it has been in France. And we need to make it easier for young people to have children. You know, there's a reason why our fertility rate is dropping, and it's partly because the cost of living for young people is so high. The age at which young people are able to get on the housing ladder keeps rising and rising, so we need to liberalise planning. We could deregulate childcare to bring down costs that way, and one can hope, but perhaps lower taxes so that young people don't have to shoulder quite so much burden there as well. And now a comment from Michael Cox. Reform is the only answer. The current parties are composed of lawyers, local government councillors and school teachers. I think it's certainly true that too many politicians at the moment have experience only in the public sector. It's also true that some Reform MPs do have that valuable private sector experience. Are they a panacea? Are they the answer to all of Britain's problems? I simply think it's too early to say, and why we might be quite disparaging of those who go into Parliament with only civil service experience under their belts. You do need some politicians who understand the machinery of government, and one of Reform's big flaws at the moment is it doesn't have a record to defend, yes, but it also doesn't have experience of running the country, and it certainly feels like a big gamble at this stage. And just one final comment. The Tory Lib Lab coalition does not represent me or anyone I know. We're living under a de facto dictatorship. None of these policies brought in were featured in their manifesto. First Past the Post has allowed a majority government to form from only 1/5 of the eligible electorate voting for Labour and from only 1/3 of the actual votes cast. Well, I can't have too much sympathy for people who don't go to the ballot box and then complain that they're not getting fair representation, but it's certainly true that Keir Starmer secured a loveless landslide in 2024 with only around 1/3 of the electorate who did vote throwing their support behind him. He's introduced a number of tax rises that weren't in the Labour manifesto, despite promises that they would stick very strictly to the pledges that they made to the country in advance of June 2024. And there's questions to be asked over whether they really have a mandate to be imposing them. That said, Labour governments always come into power and raise taxes. Many members of the British public now do feel utterly disillusioned with what they call the Uni Party after years of betrayal, not just on the economy, but perhaps the more salient issue of immigration and the fact that Tory administrations promised to bring it down in their manifestos only to preside over a massive surge, not just in legal but illegal migration as well. And that is arguably what has allowed Nigel Farage to enter the political fray in a more prominent way, and to now be polling at around 30-35%. But again, I'm not sure that we can at this stage put all of our weight behind Reform. They've yet to convince me that they're able to do everything that is necessary to form a government, and indeed, once in government, that they'll be able to confront the challenges which faced previous Tory administrations and be any more successful. That's it for this week. As always, thank you to everyone who took the time to share their thoughts in the comments. Please keep them coming, and we'll try and respond to as many of you as we can.